The rain had been falling over Washington, D.C. since late afternoon. By 8:15 p.m., the streets were nearly empty, and the porch lights of the quiet neighborhood reflected against the wet pavement. Nathaniel Cross pulled his car into his driveway. He was 42 years old, a single father, and after 12 exhausting years of studying, working, and serving the public, he had finally become something few people knew about, a United States attorney. But tonight, Nathaniel wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing gray sweatpants, an old hoodie, and carrying a grocery bag in one hand. Inside the house, his 10-year-old daughter, Grace, was waiting for him. "Dad." Nathaniel smiled as she ran toward the door. "Easy, sweetheart. You're late." "I know. The grocery store was packed." Grace grabbed the bag. "Did you get the chocolate cereal?" Nathaniel smiled. "Would I survive if I didn't?" She laughed. Then headlights suddenly appeared behind Nathaniel's car. A police cruiser stopped at the curb. Nathaniel turned. An officer stepped out. He was in his 40s, broad-shouldered and visibly impatient. "Sir." Nathaniel looked at him. "Yes." "Step away from the door." He frowned. "Why?" "Asking you to identify yourself." Nathaniel glanced at his own house. "Officer, this is my residence." "I didn't ask whose house it was." The officer walked up the driveway. "ID." Nathaniel remained calm. "May I ask why?" The officer's expression hardened. "Because I said so." Grace stood behind her father. Nathaniel immediately moved slightly in front of her. "Is there a problem?" "We received a call about a suspicious man entering this property." He looked at his clothes. "A suspicious man." "That's what I said." Nathaniel slowly reached for his wallet. The officer watched him carefully. Nathaniel handed over his driver's license. The officer looked at it, then looked at Nathaniel, then back at the license. "Nathaniel Cross." "Yes." "You live here?" "Yes." The officer glanced toward the house. "Your daughter inside?" Nathaniel's expression changed. "Are you asking about my daughter?" "Routine." "No." The officer stared at him. "Not questioning my daughter." The officer stepped closer. "Sir, don't make this difficult." Nathaniel's voice remained calm. "Not making anything difficult. I'm asking what legal basis you have for being here." The officer scoffed. "You some kind of lawyer?" Nathaniel looked at him. "Yes." The officer laughed. "Of course you are." A second cruiser arrived. A second officer stepped out. The first officer whispered something to him. The second officer looked at Nathaniel. "That's the guy, apparently." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. "What guy?" Neither officer answered. Grace whispered, "Dad, I'm scared." He turned toward her. "Go inside, sweetheart. It's okay." Grace went inside. Nathaniel watched until the door closed. Then he turned back. "Now," he said quietly, "I'd like to know why 2 officers are standing in my driveway." The first officer crossed his arms. "We received a report that a man matching your description was involved in an incident nearby." "Incident?" "A disturbance." "Where?" "2 blocks away." He nodded. "What time?" "About 30 minutes ago." He looked at his watch. "I was at the grocery store 30 minutes ago." "Anyone confirm that?" "Yes." "Who?" Nathaniel paused, then smiled faintly. "The cashier." The officer sighed. "Look, Mr. Cross, we're just doing our job." He nodded. "I respect that." "Then cooperate." "I am cooperating." "Then answer one more question." "What?" "Why did you suddenly move into this neighborhood?" Nathaniel's expression became serious. "I've lived here for 7 years." The officer froze. The second officer looked at him. 7? Nathaniel nodded. "Yes." The first officer looked embarrassed for half a second. Then his attitude changed again. "Okay, we're done here." He turned away. Nathaniel stopped him. "Actually, we're not." The officer turned. "What now?" "You entered my property, demanded identification, questioned me about my child, and accused me of being involved in a crime without explaining the basis." The officer shrugged. "You gave us your ID." "Yes." "So, what's the problem?" Nathaniel looked directly into his eyes. "The problem is that you treated me like a suspect before you treated me like a citizen." The officer laughed. "You're making this bigger than it is." Nathaniel reached into his pocket. This time, he pulled out a black leather identification wallet. He opened it. The officer glanced down. His smile disappeared. The second officer stepped closer. "What is that?" Nathaniel handed him the identification. The officer read it. His face went completely pale. He looked at Nathaniel, then at his partner. "Sir." Nathaniel calmly took the wallet back. "Name is Nathaniel Cross." He paused. "I am the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia." The first officer's mouth opened slightly. "You're—" "Yes." The second officer immediately straightened. "Mr. Cross, we didn't know." Nathaniel nodded. "That was the point." The first officer swallowed. "Sir, I apologize." Nathaniel looked at him. "You should." Then he glanced toward the house where Grace was watching through the window. "This isn't about me," Nathaniel continued. "You stopped a father at his own home. You questioned his child. smiled. You assumed guilt before asking basic questions. He paused. What happens to the people who don't have a title on an ID card? Neither officer answered. Nathaniel's voice became firmer. They deserve the same dignity I just demanded for myself. The first officer quietly said, "Understood." Nathaniel nodded. Good. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. It was his office. Nathaniel answered. Cross. A voice on the other end sounded urgent. Sir, we have a problem. Nathaniel's expression changed. What kind? The complaint that sent those officers to your house. He looked at the police cruiser. Yes. It wasn't a routine call. What was it? A pause. Then the voice said, someone deliberately reported you under a false identity. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Whose identity? The answer came quietly. Your daughter's. Nathaniel froze. What? They used Grace Cross's name to make the report. He looked toward the window. Grace was still standing there. His voice became cold. Who filed it? We don't know yet. He looked back at the officers, then toward the dark street. Find out. The call ended. The two officers stood silently. Nathaniel walked toward his front door, then stopped. He turned back. Officer. Yes, sir. Next time someone calls you about a suspicious person. He paused. Don't ask whether they look important. The officer nodded. Ask whether they're being treated fairly. Nathaniel entered his house. Grace ran into his arms. Dad, what happened? Nathaniel hugged her tightly. Nothing you need to worry about. As he looked through the window at the disappearing police cruiser, Nathaniel knew that wasn't true. Someone had used his daughter's name. Someone had sent police to his home. And whoever had done it knew exactly where Nathaniel lived. That night, Nathaniel opened his laptop and began investigating the false report himself. Within 20 minutes, he found something disturbing. The complaint had been filed from a number connected to a federal case he had prosecuted 2 years earlier, a case that had put a powerful criminal organization behind bars. Nathaniel stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. You should have stayed quiet. Nathaniel's face hardened. He closed the laptop, looked at Grace sleeping peacefully upstairs, and whispered, they made one mistake. He stood. They threatened my daughter. The next morning, Nathaniel would walk into the federal courthouse, not as a frightened father, but as the prosecutor who knew exactly where to look. And this time, he wasn't going to defend himself. He was going to expose whoever had been watching his family.